Absolute poverty. Imagine you're playing a video game with different modes to choose from. The absolute poverty mode, however, cranks the difficulty to insane, where the challenge isn't defeating a boss, but finding food before your health bar hits 0. Forget about shooting enemies or slaying dragons, because your real adversaries are hunger, dehydration, and bad weather. If you fail to snag some clean water or shelter, it's game over. Welcome to the real-life survival horror mode we call absolute poverty. This economic status means not having the bare essentials to meet your basic needs. We are not talking about skipping your morning latte or not upgrading to the latest iPhone. We are talking about not having enough food to keep going, no safe water to drink, no roof over your head, and 0 access to basic healthcare or education. To put it into perspective, global organizations like the United Nations and the World Bank use a specific income threshold to define this level of poverty. If you're living on less than $2.15 a day, you're in absolute poverty. Absolute poverty is more common in poorer countries, but you can still find it in the US and other developed nations. Meanwhile, there are different factors, such as political chaos and economic problems, that cause it. Still, the result is the same, living on the edge of survival as if every day is a high-stakes, no-respawn game where you're always just a hair away from losing. Subsistence poverty. Let's say you're poor, but not counting crumbs on your plate poor. You're surviving on the edge of possibility, where one wrong move feels like it might lead to an unplanned trip to rock bottom. This is subsistence poverty, the kind of life where you're a master of stretching resources so thin they could double as dental floss. It's a level of poverty where you've got just enough to get by. You eat enough to avoid fainting, find shelter that keeps the wind from slapping you awake, and wear clothing that covers you more out of obligation than style. Luxuries are a distant fantasy, and even basic comforts are out of reach. Life in this situation is not about dreaming of tropical vacations or the latest gadgets. It's about making it through another day without feeling like you're losing a reality game show based on survival. Every penny is accounted for, as if your wallet has a suspicious accountant peeking over your shoulder. Food is often whatever you can afford or grow yourself, depending if you have a green thumb developed by survival instincts. Your meals are designed for survival, not enjoyment, so ramen noodles have become your lifeline and nemesis. Housing is not about charm or coziness, but more about whether the roof leaks less than your bank account does. Education and healthcare are less like opportunities and more like the VIP section of a club. Your child might leave school to help support the family, and a minor illness can escalate into a full-blown disaster simply because there's nothing left for a doctor's visit or a bottle of medicine. The worst part is that it's a vicious cycle. When all your energy is spent surviving today, planning for tomorrow feels as impossible as taming a snake. You're trapped, running on a treadmill that seems to speed up when you catch your breath. Every step forward is matched by life dragging you 2 steps back. Situational poverty. Situational poverty is where you live a regular life before life throws a curveball that knocks all your finances off course. It's more of an immediate and sudden crisis caused by specific events. Imagine having a Ferrari that breaks down in the middle of nowhere without food, shelter, or people to help you. That's what it's like to be situationally poor. This can be caused by anything drastic and sudden. You're cruising through life well enough, saving a bit and feeling stable, but a sudden major event happens, leaving you with nothing. This could be a serious illness, a natural disaster, or your wife divorcing you for another man and taking 90% of your assets. Suddenly, everything starts to crumble like a house of blocks. You're left scrambling to make ends meet. What makes situational poverty stand out is that it often hits people who are used to being financially stable. They might have had decent jobs, savings, and a comfortable life, but these things can vanish faster than a slice of cake at a party. It's not just about losing money, but also about the shock of going from buying organic kale without flinching to debating whether to pay the electric bill or stock up on canned soup. Imagine trying to figure out how to make rent while simultaneously dealing with a car that decided to become a very expensive lawn ornament. The good news is that situational poverty is usually temporary. Most people bounce back after months of sheer panic and creative budgeting. For example, during the recent pandemic, millions lost financial footing because of sudden layoffs and business closures. Moderate poverty. When you're moderately poor, it's like you're saying, "I'm alive, but I'm not okay." It's essentially a situation where you can eat, sleep, and buy clothes, but just barely. You're surviving, but it's far from comfortable, as you live in hard mode. Think of it like constantly being one unexpected bill away from a financial disaster. You can afford groceries, pay for a modest apartment, and send your kids to school, but one broken appliance or a minor illness is enough to send your finances spiraling. It's like building a house of cards and sneezing at the wrong moment. A single unpaid sick day or an unexpected price hike can make you rethink if you really need to eat 3 square meals daily. Moderate poverty is defined internationally as earning between $3.65 and $6.85 daily. While that might cover the basics in some areas, it is no backstage pass to comfort. You might manage a meal, a ride to work, and a place to sleep, but anything extra is wishful thinking. Saving for emergencies is not an option because you are busy figuring out how to make pennies stretch like rubber bands. Education and healthcare are technically available, but their quality can leave a lot to be desired. Schools might be so overcrowded that kids learn more about survival strategies than algebra. And healthcare often involves waiting so long that the illness gets bored and escalates just to keep things interesting. It is better than having nothing, but it feels like winning a prize broken out of the box. Moderate poverty feels like living on the edge of just enough. You're not starving or sleeping on the streets, but every step feels like walking on a tightrope over a pit of financial chaos. Generational poverty. You're conversing with friends, and they start boasting about what they inherited from their family. One talks about the classic car he got from his grandfather, while another boasts about the beach house his dad got him. Feeling left out in the conversation because you don't have anything to boast about, you say, "I inherited poverty from my dad, just like how he inherited poverty from his dad." That's essentially what generational poverty is. You've probably heard about generational wealth, where families pass down riches like a financial hot potato. Generational poverty is like playing hot potato, but the potato is rotten and smells funny. It's when you're poor because your parents were poor, and they were poor because their parents were poor. It's a family tree, except the leaves are just unpaid bills. Think of it this way: poverty in the family is like inheriting your grandma's secret recipe book, but instead of warm, gooey cookies, it's filled with recipes for struggle. Ingredients include a dash of low-paying jobs, a pinch of limited education, and a cup of missed opportunities. You know, the kind of recipe no one's pinning on Pinterest. You've probably heard the saying, "It's not your fault if you're born poor, but it's your fault if you die poor." Inspirational, sure, but breaking out of generational poverty is like trying to do a magic trick without a wand. Imagine growing up in a household where everyone's barely scraping by, and the neighborhood is a live-action version of survival mode. It's like being handed a treasure map that doesn't make sense. Take education, for example. If your parents couldn't afford college, chances are neither can you. It's like someone cuts the ladder of success in half and hands you the bottom part. Or if your community's version of career goals is juggling 3 odd jobs just to pay the rent, it's hard to imagine doing anything else. You're stuck running on a hamster wheel without exposure to new skills or a chance at a good diploma. Urban poverty. Let's say you live in the middle of a huge city, complete with skyscrapers, bright lights, and celebrities. You think you've made it just because you live in a place like New York or Tokyo. But those huge buildings, corporate opportunities, and nice cars are all out of reach. Welcome to urban poverty, where dreams are tall, but your budget isn't. Urban poverty happens when people in cities struggle to make ends meet because a big city equals higher cost of living. Sure, being in a nice city with all the lights and buildings sounds great until you realize you're stuck in a crumbling apartment on the outskirts while the rich folks sip lattes in the business district. It's like being at a concert but hearing the music from the parking lot. Cities are supposed to be places of opportunity, but the twist is that everything costs an arm and a leg. Rent is absurdly high for apartments the size of closets, and finding a job that pays enough to cover it feels like a game of hide and seek, where the paycheck is always hiding. The challenges don't stop there. Housing in urban poverty is often overcrowded or unsafe, with families squeezed into spaces so small even their dreams are claustrophobic. Clean water and sanitation can feel like mythical luxuries, and health risks are piling up like your laundry on a chair. Education is marketed as the golden ticket out of poverty, but for many kids, schools are either packed like sardine cans or located on the other side of Narnia. Structural poverty. Structural poverty is like playing a board game where the rules were already rigged. Someone keeps taking your pieces, and every dice roll is against you. You're not losing because you made poor choices or not working hard enough. Instead, it's about the system being stacked against certain groups of people from the start. This type of poverty happens when society plays the ultimate prank by stacking the deck against people, no matter how hard they try. Imagine being told to climb a ladder only to find out your ladder is actually a slide. For instance, people born into low-income families often find the good stuff, like quality education and healthcare, is stashed behind a members-only curtain. The result is a vicious cycle where generations of people are stuck in poverty, like being in a video game where you're forever stuck on level 1, while others zip by with cheat codes and unlimited lives. Structural poverty has a list of villains longer than a superhero movie: discrimination, lousy education systems, unaffordable housing, and jobs that pay peanuts all play a part. Even if you work 3 jobs and skip vacations for a decade, it can still feel like you're treading water in a pool that keeps getting deeper. Educational poverty. Imagine you're baking a cake but don't have the recipe, half the ingredients, or even the oven preheated. That's what educational poverty feels like for millions of people. It's not just about being poor financially, but more about not having access to quality education or resources to learn effectively. And just like a botched cake, the results can be disappointing. Educational poverty is when someone doesn't get enough education or the right kind to thrive. Picture a classroom with no textbooks, trained teachers, or roof. Basically, it's a sunbathing club that calls itself a school. Trying to learn there is like diving into a pool with no water. But educational poverty doesn't stop at the school gates, because it's a gift that keeps giving. Families without good education might find homework time turning into a family-wide guessing game. Communities face a future that looks less like a bright sunrise and more like a flickering light bulb. The cycle repeats, like a bad sequel to a movie that shouldn't have been made in the first place. Globally, over 260 million kids are out of school. That's equal to an entire country full of uneducated people. Even kids who do make it to school often miss out on learning essential skills, like reading or math, thanks to broken systems. The effects are as dramatic as attempting to cross a broken bridge to a brighter future, and there isn't even a safety net ready to catch you when you fall. Working poverty. You've got a job, maybe even 2 or 3, but your bank account still looks like it's on a diet. Rent, food, and other basics keep eating up your paycheck faster than you can say savings. It's what we call working poverty, when people are working, often full-time or more, but still can't cover their basic needs. You might be wondering how this is even possible. After all, work is supposed to help you escape poverty. In theory, yes, but reality is out here rewriting the rules. Low-wage jobs pay so little that even a full-time schedule won't cover the essentials. Toss in part-time gigs, unpredictable hours, or the occasional surprise paycheck that's lighter than you expected, and you've got a financial roller coaster without a safety harness. And don't hold your breath for benefits like health insurance or paid leave, because most of these jobs act like they've never even heard of them. Then there's the cost of living. In some areas, rent alone can eat up your paycheck like it's on an all-you-can-eat buffet. That leaves crumbs for groceries, transportation, or the occasional coffee splurge. Combine that with unexpected expenses like medical bills or car repairs, and you have a recipe for constant financial stress. Working poverty also has a ripple effect. Parents in this situation often struggle to afford childcare, meaning they can't work extra hours or return to school to climb the career ladder. Meanwhile, the stress of constantly juggling bills can weigh on your mental and physical health, leaving you feeling like the lead in a tragic soap opera. Relative poverty. Let's say you and your friends are in a fancy restaurant with many dishes. Someone orders lobster, while another one goes for an A5 Wagyu steak. Then there's you, only ordering fried chicken because that's all your budget allows. You're happily munching away, but as you glance at their plates, you realize they're eating meals fit for royalty while you're eating food for peasants. That's relative poverty served hot. Relative poverty isn't about having absolutely nothing, but it's more like playing Monopoly and realizing everyone else is buying hotels while you're stuck mortgaging your house. It's a measure that shifts depending on where and when you live. In a wealthy country, being relatively poor might mean struggling to afford Wi-Fi, a smartphone, or a car, basically the modern-day survival kit. People might just think you're showing off with all that fancy technology in another time or place. To put it in context, governments set a poverty threshold as if they're drawing a line in the sand to say, below here, life's a struggle. It's usually a percentage of the median income. So if the median income is $50,000 and you're earning $25,000, congrats, you've won the title of relatively poor. You're not really poor, but your lifestyle might involve more ramen noodles and fewer Michelin stars than the average person. What makes relative poverty tricky is that it's like trying to win a race where the finish line keeps moving. If everyone's income goes up but yours only gets a polite nudge, you might feel poorer even with more money in your pocket. Even with more money in your pocket, the standard of living around you keeps sprinting ahead, making relative poverty the ultimate master of hide and seek.